The story begins in the eastern continent, where the forces of the barbarians clash with the defending soldiers of the Eldoran kingdom. In the bloody battlefield, heads go flying as the powerful barbarians gain the upper hand and tear through Eldoran forces like paper. Still, the captain of the Eldoran troop, Seraphina, refuses to give up on her comrades. She rallies her troops to continue fighting and cut a path out for retreat. Even as Seraphina cuts through some barbarian soldiers, she notes that her side has taken too many casualties to have a chance at making it out alive. Suddenly, a new monster appears from the barbarians' side. Vior, a giant barbarian elite, shreds through Eldoran soldiers and lands straight in front of Seraphina with his bloody blade raised high. Vior easily spots Seraphina as the seasoned captain among the common soldiers and challenges her to a one-on-one. Knowing that no one else can stand a chance against this monster's huge blade, Seraphina agrees to the fight, hoping to buy some time for her men to escape. She jumps high up and plunges down at Vior, who parries her attack while casually standing. Then, he swings at Seraphina with his immense power and sends her flying to the side. Seraphina lands on her feet and rebounds to launch another attack at Vior, and the two of them start trading blows in a heated exchange. Although Seraphina impressively keeps up with Vior's strength, his overwhelming power still forces her back. Left with no other choice, she uses her ultimate technique that casts a magic enhancement on her sword. Using all her remaining strength, she roars and takes on Vior's final strike. Just as the two swords meet, one of the blades breaks and goes flying into the ground. The Eldoran soldiers watch, stunned, as their captain holds a broken sword in defeat. Seraphina collapses to her knees, accepting defeat, and Vior sincerely praises her for holding her own against him for so long. Seraphina then asks him to kill her as a warrior deserves, but Vor refuses to take her life. Instead, he flashes her a sinister grin and promises that he'll take her alive and put her body to good use. After this ominous warning, Seraphina loses consciousness and wakes up in a dark prison cell, wearing a dirty rag and strong shackles. Shocked, she looks around and gathers her bearings for a bit. She then finally remembers that she was defeated by the barbarians and is now their captive. Once she remembers Vior's final warning, Seraphina gets terrified, wondering what kind of torture the barbarians will inflict on her. She wonders if they'll use her as a slave, or if they'll subject her to immense pain for entertainment. In the end, the scariest thought flashes through her mind, and she wonders if Vior wants to use her body as a woman. Since Seraphina is still an unmarried young noble, the thought of a brutish barbarian sullying her pure body puts her in serious anxiety. Then, Seraphina also realizes that her poor comrades were still surrounded by barbarians after she got knocked out, thinking that they all got slaughtered or taken captive just like her. She feels a crushing rush of despair. In the end, she feels the most worried for the common people of her kingdom, since without the eastern land, their crops will continue to die with no land left to plant. All of these regrets bring the experienced captain to tears, but suddenly, she hears another person's voice behind her. Seraphina looks around to see Circe, a female servant carrying some water with her. Seraphina takes a closer look at Circe and finds some pliers and tools on her belt, so she thinks that she's here to torture her for information. However, Circe doesn't mention anything about torture, and instead reveals that she's here to prepare Seraphina as the perfect trophy for King Vior. She then chains Seraphina to the wall to prevent her from moving, and the knight captain braces herself for some brutal torture. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, Vior thinks about visiting Seraphina, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Back at the prison cell, Seraphina is now nude while Circe washes her body with a wet cloth. Once she finishes cleaning, Seraphina asks Circe why she's going through so much ceremony for a slave like her. Circe points out that Seraphina's body was filthy from the battle, so she was simply cleaning her up. Circe then makes a casual comment about her appearance, surprised that she's the woman who battled her master for so long. Circe explains that she was expecting Seraphina to look more muscular since she can hold her own against Vior, but instead, she's simply a feminine girl. Hearing this, Seraphina's ego gets bruised since she thinks a knight like her has no time to look girly or cute. Circe understands her emotions, but she reveals that Vior really likes how Seraphina looks. This statement leaves Seraphina even more confused, but Circe refuses to explain further. Instead, she quietly warns Seraphina that she's never leaving barbarian territory again, all while holding a sharp knife in her hand. Seraphina thinks that her end is finally near, and she desperately struggles against her restraints, hoping for a miracle. battle. As Circe gets closer with the sharp knife and cold metal pliers, Seraphina finally gives up and closes her eyes. However, for some reason, Circe only cuts her restraints and trims her fingernails and puts a dress on Seraphina's body. As she opens her eyes, Seraphina notices the strangely decent clothes, and she realizes that her dress is scented with perfume. She wonders why on earth the barbarians would give their prisoner a scented robe, and wonders if they're preparing her for a sacrificial ritual or something. Before she can ask Circe, she hears a loud roar coming from the surface above the dungeon. Circe confirms that Vior is here, and soon, the massive barbarian king lumbers into Seraphina's prison cell. After entering the cell, Vior formally introduces himself as the son of barbarian great chief Olden One-Eye. Meanwhile, Seraphina observes his massive body and golden eyes, realizing there's no way he's a human being. She then recalls a story from her grandfather about an expedition against the barbarian soldiers. Even back then, the powerful brutes easily overwhelmed the human forces and ripped their hearts out for their rituals. Thinking she's about to face the same fate, Seraphina tells Vior that she's not afraid of anyone, and she dares him to do whatever he wants with her. Hearing this, Vior wonders what she's talking about since he has no plans of sacrificing her. He finally explains the real reason why he captured her was to take her as his bride. With just these few words, Seraphina's world turns upside down, and all the anxiety in her mind rushes to her face in the form of a beet red blush. At first, she's too shocked to fully understand what's happening, so she asks Vior if this is a prank. When Vior explains he truly wants to marry her, Seraphina completely loses her mind. She asks him why he'd marry an enemy, so Vior explains that his barbarian race has no problems with loving their enemies. Then, he goes into a state of fiery passion as he recalls the traditions of his proud ancestors. Ever since the dawn of the barbarian race, their strongest kings would always marry a female knight to honor their passion for the sword. Despite this explanation, Seraphina still refuses to become his wife. The sneaky barbarian reminds her that she told him to do whatever he wanted with her, so Seraphina is left trapped by her own words. Then, Vior also explains that he's not just marrying her for the sake of a cultural tradition. He recalls their fight on the battlefield, where he felt the sincerity of Seraphina's passion for her sword. Facing such a powerful woman, he immediately fell in love with her and decided he'd marry her no matter what. After hearing Vior's sincere confession, Seraphina is too flustered to respond, so he turns around to leave the room. Before leaving, Vior promises that he won't force her to marry against her will, so she can carefully consider her decision. After he finally leaves the cell, the shell-shocked knight wonders what's going to happen to her in this crazy dungeon. While waiting for her marriage, Seraphina recalls a memory from 7 years ago. Back then, her brother Sidious notified Seraphina that she was named as the captain of an expedition to the barbarian lands. Seraphina agreed and started leaving to attend her duties, but Sidious stopped her to hand over an invitation to a noble banquet. She was confused and wondered what her brother wanted, so Sidious reminded her that she was still a noble lady with a reputation to uphold. Seeing her brother's intense stare, Seraphina stood straight and immediately accepted the invitation. Later, she dressed up in pretty clothes and arrived at Countess Ildhol's mansion for the banquet. Seeing Seraphina dressed up in normal clothes, the nobles around her started making comments about her profession. In hushed whispers, all of the venomous elites made horrible remarks about Seraphina's appearance, wondering if a delicate lady like her would ever be worthy of leading seasoned warriors in battle. Even though they all knew her real strength, the nobles thought it was a waste for a woman to be as strong as her. Seraphina felt overwhelmed by all the negative comments, so she went to a balcony for some fresh air. Then, a few young ladies went out and asked her to join them instead of sulking alone. As the four of them sat together, the young ladies asked Seraphina if she was scared of her dreadful job. Hearing stories of monsters and dragons, the ladies wondered if Seraphina would be okay in such dangerous situations. Sera smiled and explained that dragons were just imaginary creatures, but the ladies reminded her that she's still going to face the barbarians. Knowing the tales of the brutal barbarians and their horrible treatment of female knights, the ladies tell Sera to stay at home to avoid a brutal end. However, she slams her hands on the table to silence them all. Sera confidently declares that their kingdom has been trying since day one to conquer the eastern lands. In her mind, only by conquering the east could their kingdom gain enough resources to feed their people, so she was ready to fight against the barbarians. Still, the young ladies reminded Seraphina that even the prestigious Princess Wisteria, who was her role model, went missing after she faced the barbarians. All of the ladies advised her to remain home and marry a suitable husband, but Sira grew tired of their negative attitude and left the gathering. Afterward, as she headed back home on her carriage, she felt disgusted by the nobles, who dined on luxurious meals while their common people starved on the streets. On her way back, she encountered a poor man being attacked by 3 guys. The boys themselves were starving peasants, forced to rob others for the sake of their survival. Still, Sira jumped in to protect the poor man and warned the robbers to back off. With no way out, the boys tried attacking her with their farming tools, but Sira easily defeated them. The boys wondered if their lives were about to end, but suddenly, Sira took pity on them and gave them her precious necklace. Shocked, the boys thanked her for her precious gift and promised never to hurt another person again. After they left, Sira felt her heart clench from pain at the state of her people. Internally, she made a promise to her people that she would return victorious from the east and bring peace to their kingdom. A few days later, before leaving for the expedition, Sira paid respects to the missing princess Wisteria. Suddenly, her brother popped up from behind, furious that she couldn't find a husband again at the banquet. Seraphina reminded Sidious that she was about to fight for their kingdom, but the proud prince firmly told her that women could never fight on the front lines. As he angrily shouted her name, suddenly, the prince's voice shifted into Vior's. Vior advanced towards her and stretched out a hand, determined to make his wife no matter what. As the barbarian grabs her, Seraphina's nightmare finally ends, and she wakes up in a cold sweat. She then hears a powerful snore coming from nearby, and she notices Vior sleeping right next to her. In an instant, the sight of Vior's powerful body brings Seraphina to her senses, and she draws a cold breath, terrified of handling him as his wife. In a few moments, Sira manages to recollect her scattered thoughts. She screams at Vior for being with her, but he explains that they're currently in his bedroom. Hearing this, Sira gets even more outraged and asks why Vior is naked with her. He ignores her question and instead acts like he's relieved that she's feeling fine after last night. The image in Sira's mind continues to grow even worse, and she thinks that this brutish barbarian forced himself on her. Unable to bear the affront of her dignity, Sira tells Vior to just put her out of her misery. Vior stops her, wondering why she wants to die instead of killing him. Sira points out that a barbarian has no idea what a woman's honor means back in her kingdom, so he has no right to judge her feelings. She also reminds him that she just got defeated in battle, so her honor as a knight also took a huge blow. Vior understands her frustration, but he still thinks it's not enough to justify ending her life. Instead, he encourages her to move on and appreciate her blessing of life. As the two of them argue, Circe enters the room with some clothes for Vior. She realizes that Sira had a misunderstanding and explains that she overdosed on a sleeping drug they gave her. Since Vior didn't expect the drug to be so strong, he felt worried and took her to his own bedroom to watch while she rested. Finally, Sira realizes that Vior simply took care of her instead of compromising her chastity while she was unconscious. Still, she gets mad at him for creating such a misunderstanding. Vior once again glosses over her anger like it's nothing, and instead focuses on getting breakfast. Once he's finished changing clothes, he leaves to eat and tells Sira to come out whenever she's ready. After Vior leaves the room, Sira collapses to the floor, overwhelmed by all the emotions she just experienced. She feels ashamed that a proud knight like her is relying on her worst enemies for food and shelter, and remembers the teachings of her grandfather. Despite training his own granddaughter, Sira's grandfather also felt bad that she was born a woman. Even he told her to marry a husband to find her happiness, just like her brother Sidious. Having heard so many demoralizing words, Sira realizes that Vior is the only person who appreciated her knighthood and found it attractive. Still, her ego refuses to let her accept his love, and instead focuses on having the breakfast prepared for her. Being a prisoner of war, Sira thinks that Vior will give her an awful breakfast to humiliate her. However, when she actually goes out, her jaw drops at the sight in front of her. Seeing the giant slab of roasted fatty meat, she starts foaming at the mouth since her impoverished nation could never afford so much meat. Vior thinks that Sira must be hungry, so he gives her 10 pounds of meat, thinking it's a normal size for human knights. In reality, the chunk of meat is bigger than Sira's torso, which is more meat than she eats in an entire year. Sira thinks that Vior is trying to bribe her into accepting him with this delicious feast, so she swears that she'd rather die than accept this gift. Unfortunately, her stomach roars in protest, so Sira gets embarrassed enough to ask for death again. Vior gets confused why she seeks fakes death at every minor inconvenience and reminds her that if her stomach is growling for good, it means that her body wants to live. Finally, he tells her to stop overthinking and just accept the meal. Meanwhile, Cersei goes to Syrah and explains that although Vior is acting all nonchalant, he actually went out to hunt this meat specifically for her. She reminds Syrah that Vior is also a noble among barbarians, so if she refused his kind gift, it would be bad etiquette. Syrah takes this bait to accept his gift, and when she finally takes a bite, the juicy meat instantly captures her heart. Syrah literally starts crying since she has never eaten such tender meat before, and Vior notices how much she's enjoying it. As he notices her, she perks up and acts like the food is just okay. Then, she reluctantly forgives Vior for causing her the misunderstanding in the morning. After that, Syrah also gets curious about the creature he got the meat from. Vior explains that the creature has already been butchered, so his men are cleaning up the rest of its hide outside. Syrah peers out of the window, thinking that it would be some sort of juicy cattle. Instead, she's greeted by the sight of a vicious dragon. Shocked, she wonders if these are the dragons from legends which are supposed to breathe fire. Vior chuckles, explaining that although fire-breathing dragons exist, this one is just a herbivore. Then, he notices Syrah polishing off all the meat even though she was shocked about its source. Once Syrah finishes eating, Vior asks her to go outside with him. Syrah still doesn't trust him, so she feels hesitant about going out. Vior wonders if she's simply scared of the beasts she'll see in the foreign land, so she gets angry and accepts his challenge. As Syrah gets ready to go out, she still warns Vior that she doesn't trust him. He accepts her warning, but he still thinks that she will love the scenery outside. Soon, as Syrah steps out of the house, she is stunned to see a peaceful meadow thriving with wildlife. Vior notices her surprise, so he explains that although their battlefield was a wasteland, the rest of barbarian lands are full of life. Then, Vior starts walking to show her another sight, so Syrah mentally prepares herself for the surprises up ahead. While they take a walk through the forest, Syrah curiously looks around at all the wildlife around them. Up above, she spots a dragon flying in the sky, so Vior explains that they're simply a normal animal living in their lands. Although it's difficult to hunt dragons, they usually don't bother the barbarians as long as they don't venture into their lairs. Syrah is annoyed that Vior is treating these terrifying beasts so casually, but he reminds her that she just ate one for breakfast. Embarrassed, Syrah grows silent and continues walking. Soon, she hears a soft humming sound in the distance and wonders what it is. As she gets closer to the sound, she gets shocked to see a pristine, clear waterfall. Shocked, Syrah blurts out that she's never seen one before, so Vior wonders if her kingdom doesn't have any waterfalls. Syrah grows defensive and starts to deny it, but then she remembers that the Eldoran kingdom truly does not have these natural sights. Vior feels bad and reassures that he only wanted to show her the beautiful waterfall, not brag about his land's resources. Then, he suddenly takes off his shirt and tells Syrah to do the same. Shocked, she wonders why, so Vior tells her that they must get into the water together. With her perverted mind, Syrah starts to picture some illegal activities, but Vior explains that he simply wants her to take a bath. Still, she reminds him that a man and a woman bathing together is completely unacceptable. Vior tells her the barbarians don't share her culture, so he doesn't care if they're together. Cersei also gets close to Syrah and reminds her that she hasn't had a bath after her bloody fight on the battlefield. She points out that if she doesn't bathe soon, her grimy body will stink up their entire place. Finally, Syrah agrees to take a bath, but she sends Vior somewhere else so he can't see her. Cersei accompanies Syrah to the bath, so she thinks that she's keeping an eye on her. However, Cersei tells her that she's actually watching her to ensure her safety. Syrah feels confused, but suddenly, a massive snapping turtle pops out in front of nowhere. Terrified, she clings to a rock, and Cersei tells her that there are many more weird creatures here that will scare her. Still, she wonders why Syrah is so scared since these creatures are peaceful animals. Suddenly, Syrah notices a bunch of eldritch monstrosities that look more like something out of horror stories than animals, and she runs away from the terrifying waterfall. Cersei feels worried about her, but she doesn't give chase when she realizes where Syrah is headed. Meanwhile, after Syrah stops panicking, she realizes that she left her clothes back at the waterfall. Suddenly, a bird cries loudly, which breaks her train of thought. Then, Syrah prepares to head back to get her clothes. However, a strange man calls out to her, so she wonders if it's finally time for her to lose her innocence to some strange barbarian. As the man approaches her, she instinctively backs off and tells him to stay away. He refuses to listen and gets closer, so Sira finally catches a glimpse of his handsome face. She starts comparing the handsome stranger to the men back in her kingdom, but then she remembers that she's still naked in a towel. Sira tells the man to stay back again, but he remains standing in place. Instead, he notices how pathetic she's looking and figures out that she must have run away from her bath after getting scared. Thankfully, the young man doesn't mock her for being scared. He reveals that his mother was also a woman from the West, so she would get scared in the bath just like Sira. His mother used to tell him stories about her kingdom, which lacked wildlife and nature, just like Sira's homeland. Surprised, Sira wonders if this barbarian's mother was a missing female knight captured during her grandfather's expedition. While she's lost in her thoughts, the young man puts his own clothes around her. Then, he tells her to go back with him so they can find her clothes. Sira feels surprised that a barbarian could be such a gentleman, and wonders if Vior is just a special, deranged case. Meanwhile, the man notices that her face is red, so he gets close to check if she has a fever. Being a noble maiden, Sira feels completely flustered by his touch. The man thinks that her fever is too intense, so she can't hike all the way back down the mountain. He scoops her into his arms to carry her down. Soon, Circe finds both of them standing together and wonders how her master Vior managed to tame Sira so easily. Hearing his name, Sira finally realizes that the young man holding her is none other than Vior with a shaved beard. He grins, pleased to see how shocked she is. Enraged by his deception, Sira slaps Vior, who happily praises her for producing so much more. As they walk back home, Circe wonders if Vior will be okay, while Sira warns him that she would have challenged him to a duel if she had her sword. Then, she blames him for her panic since he brought her to such a dangerous area. However, Circe explains that the wildlife around them is all peaceful, since Vior personally patrols the area to make sure it's clear of any dangerous beast. Vior also explains that he bathed alone since Sira wanted privacy, or else he would have protected her. Sira then wonders if creatures like dragons are dangerous enough to guard against. Vior explains that although dragons are strong, they're usually cowardly and they don't provoke people by themselves. However, Circe points out that only Vior is strong enough to consider dragons cowards. He then turns to Sira, pleased that he got to see a new side of her. Embarrassed by his attention, Sira forgives him as thanks for the beautiful scenery and leaves the area in a rage. On the way back home, she thinks it won't be too bad being Vior's wife, since he's so handsome without a beard. Unfortunately, just a few days later, she finds him back with a full beard, putting his looks back to square one. A few days later, Sira impatiently listens as Vior invites her to a meeting with his clan members. He shows her the meeting venue, which is the barbarian race's oldest and largest settlement, called the Lakeside Village. Sira notes the village's location, but then she wonders why Vior is leaking potential military intel to her. She wonders if Vior is underestimating her and reminds him that she could always escape to her homeland and leak this information to her military. As Vior hears her warning, he starts laughing loudly. He reminds Sira that she was love-struck with his shaven face just a few days ago, so there's no way she'd want to hurt him. He also thinks that he can easily make her his wife, so he's not worried about her leaking any sensitive information. While the two of them argue non-stop, Circe notes that they're already acting like a married couple. After some time, they all reach the meeting spot, where Sira finds herself surrounded by 100 intimidating men. Armed to the teeth, every single one of the seasoned barbarians begs Vior to give them a chance at testing their blade against the female captain. Sira thinks that her time has finally come since the barbarians want to kill her as revenge for defeating their comrades. However, Vior tells the barbarians to back off and give her a proper welcome into their tribe. At their leader's command, all of the hot-blooded barbarians calm down and give Sira some space. Seeing their cheerful looks, Sira wonders why they're all gathered here if they didn't want to kill her. Vior explains that they're simply here to give her a welcome, hoping to get a sparring match with her. This confuses her even more, and she asks Vior why none of the barbarians want revenge. To answer her question, Vior asks the barbarians themselves if they hold any hatred for Sira. All of them seriously declare that they bear no ill will, and they line up in a warrior's formation to welcome her into the tribe. Sira still doesn't trust the barbarians, thinking that they're just following their leader's orders. Still, she follows both Vior and Circe into the formation. While they're walking, suddenly, one of the barbarians bursts into tears and breaks formation behind Sira. Inspired by her bravery, he praises her for her incredible display display of martial arts on the battlefield. Sira is completely speechless as more barbarians begin chiming in, praising both her beauty and skills. She gets completely flustered by all this praise from her enemies, but Vior reminds her that all barbarians respect strength no matter who it belongs to. Stunned, she continues following him deeper into the village. While walking around, she observes a peaceful community engaging with animal processing. Suddenly, Vior stops in front of a house where water is being boiled. He tells Cersei and Sira that they'll stay in this house while he handles a meeting with the elders. Then, he announces his presence to the house residents. Soon, a kind lady pops out of the house, wondering what Vior wants. He introduces Sira as his wife to her and tells her to take care of Sira while he's gone. Surprised, the lady instantly falls for Sira's charming beauty. She drags her inside to take care of her, not even bothering to listen to the poor girl's complaints. Inside, the lady apologizes for being so forceful, but Sira forgives her. Then, she calls to her son, Gatter, and orders him to bring some medicinal herbs for her. As the little boy struggles to rummage through a big box, his mother holds up the cover for him to help him search. Soon, he pulls out a herb pouch, and the lady brings it over to some boiling water to make tea. Sira wonders if it's normal for barbarians to put herbs in their tea, and the lady nods. Then, the woman next to her notes that they'll need more boiled water to make enough tea for everyone. She sends her kids to grab some more firewood. So Sira is impressed that the young barbarian children are already taught to be so strong and independent. The kids' mother doesn't think much of it, saying that they're just copying their elders. Then, once the tea is done, Sira takes a sip. She admits that the tea is better than she expected, with the herbal taste refreshing her body. Cersei thinks that the herbs taste good because they come from the special sacred tree. Once Sira finishes her cup, she eagerly asks for another one. Afterward, she notices that the two mothers living in the house aren't related. She wonders if they're the only people living in the house and asks if their husbands are working in the military outside. However, the woman surprises her by revealing that both of them are widows. She explains that their husbands lost their lives in a battle against the West, so Sira feels guilty about the crimes of her own people. Even though she knows that the Western army was fighting to get resources for her own people, Sira still feels bad that they ruined innocent lives. She apologizes to both mothers for her army, thinking they have every right to be angry at her. However, the barbarian woman feels confused because she thinks they want revenge. Sira reminds them that it was her people who killed their husbands and points out that it may have very well been herself. Hearing this, the women finally grow silent. Then, the eldest of them speaks out. Although she feels sad that her youngest son couldn't see his father's face, she still thinks it's a blessing that he was present for his father's funeral. Ever since then, she remained grateful for her son and continued to raise him with love and care. She also points out that if it weren't for war, barbarian men would lose their lives in other risky adventures like caves, monster fighting, or dragon hunting. Even if they didn't lose their lives, the barbarian warriors could end up disabled forever. So she thinks that it's normal for their women to lose their husbands so often. Hearing this, Sira is completely stunned, and she wonders if all barbarians treat the loss of a person's life so casually. Suddenly, an alarm bell rings out in the town as the guard towers detect an incoming attack. Inside the house, Cersei realizes what's happening and warns everyone that they're under attack. Before anyone can react, a flying creature bursts into the house from above. Once the smoke clears, Sira finds herself staring at a winged dragon with a large beak. Cersei notes that the dragon is called a Tsukubaikshi, and it's attracted to the smoke from burning firewood. Sira realizes that their tea party caused this creature to attack, but Cersei points out that the dragons don't normally invade their village since they know the warriors would kill them. Unfortunately, they've got no time to investigate. Since Gatter gets scared of the dragon and starts crying in his mother's arms, the sound of the boys crying grabs the dragon's attention, so Sira gets ready for a fight. Cersei tells Sira to escape the village since she's Vior's precious wife. However, Sira firmly refuses. She gets angry at Cersei for treating the lives of her other people as expendable and focusing on just a single other person. She then reminds Cersei that she's not a fragile princess to be shielded. With her pride as an Eldoran knight captain, Sira bravely faces the dragon with a pair of hot tongs. As the creature roars at her, she knocks it back by using the tongs as a baseball bat. Cersei feels shocked and warns Sira that she can't defeat the dragon with a measly cooking tool. However, Sira doesn't want to argue anymore, and she tells Cersei to just run away. She also also notes that the dragon's strike wasn't nearly as powerful as Vior's sword, so she feels confident that she can defeat it. Determined to protect the people behind her, Sira jumps behind the dragon's face and she stabs it square in the eye. While Cersei continues watching her, Sira orders her to leave and stop wasting her time. Finally, Cersei realizes that she's endangering Sira's life by distracting her, and she leaves the house at last. After Cersei leaves, Sira taunts the dragon to face her. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, the barbarian warriors tie down another dragon. With the creature restrained, Vior charges up and cuts off its neck. Then, he asks the soldiers how many other dragons are invading the village. One soldier informs him that there are still 3 other dragons left, so Vior tells him to search for any villager who hasn't evacuated yet. The soldier agrees. While Vior thinks that Sira must be safe since Cersei would have helped her escape, after addressing his own worries, he rallies the barbarians to cover the rest of the village and takes down 2 more of the remaining dragons. After defeating the other 2, Vior wonders where the last one is. Suddenly, Cersei comes rushing to him without Sira behind her. She tells Vior that a dragon attacked the house where they were staying, and before she can even complete her sentence, Vior flies past her. Near the house, Sira runs away from the dragon, realizing that the flying creature is faster than her out in the open. Unable to escape its fast speed, she turns around and prepares for a last stand. Although the dragon is also exhausted from the long fight, it still lunges towards Sira at a blinding speed. This time, its sharp beak breaks the tongs, leaving Sira with nothing to defend herself. Finally, she thinks that after taking pity on her defenseless enemies, she can die as a knight with her honor still intact. As the dragon approaches her to deliver the final blow, Sira closes her eyes, not even bothering to put up a struggle. But right when she prepares for death, Vior comes rushing behind her, screaming at her to cover her ears. Shocked, Sira does as she is told, and suddenly, Vior roars loudly at the dragon. His booming voice blows the poor creature's eardrums out, and Vior takes this chance to slice it apart. Watching the dragon fall in front of her, Sira remains stunned as Vior apologizes for being late. He then sincerely thanks her for risking her own life to save his precious people. Finally, Vior expresses his relief that she's still okay. Hearing the sincere concern in his voice, tears start flowing down Sira's face. At this moment, she feels confused as to why she's crying, but the tears continue pouring down. Vior silently smiles at her and then carries her back to the village, knowing she's in no condition to be walking. As Cersei notices him returning, she yells out in joy, while Sira allows Vior to treat her like a princess. That was episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.